Welcome to the first podcast of Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. Hi, I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy, and here's where we're going to be exploring everything related to narcissism, narcissistic abuse, and healthy relationships. I go live on TikTok 3 times a week, and what we'll be listening to here is a replay of those lives, where we talk about real issues with real people. So today we're going to jump into listening more about boundaries. What are normal boundaries, healthy boundaries? How do we manage this in relationships? So let's listen in to a TikTok live on boundaries. So I started listening this morning to a content creator out of Mexico. It's fascinating. It was another psychologist talking about healthy relationships. And he was talking about limit setting and the importance of limit setting starting right from infancy and upward. And how a lot of times what we're seeing in adulthood is a lack of, he was kind of putting a lack of proper parenting. I agree with him, but I also think that it's more complicated than that. But I would love to know what you think. When you look at those who in your life who you've considered to have a toxic relationship, what do you think is the reason why they're struggling? I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I have over 20 years of counseling experience. So we're here to talk about anything about narcissistic abuse, anything that you guys wanted to talk to related to. I'm seeing this one person who's having a lot of fun here with this conversation. So I'm going to be muting that individual. So this stops being disruptive here. But we can talk about anything that you guys have as questions about narcissistic abuse. I put up a new video today. It's doing really well, and I know it was a fascinating one. I just got done with a whole weekend of seminars on narcissistic abuse. I'm doing a lot of continuing education. One of the things that's kind of sad is that psychology has been slow to catch up to the fact that narcissistic abuse is happening. The reason is it's really understandable when you understand how we understand people is that we look at people as individuals. We don't consider necessarily, yes, we are aware that people are in a relationship, but we don't treat relationships so much as we treat people. So when someone comes in the office and says, oh, this is really happening to me, then we look at you as the individual about what kind of boundaries need to be holding, how are you handling it, maybe is this a problem you're having in other relationships? So we kind of view it from that perspective. But what we fail to see is that these people are coming in because of the relationship, that the relationship's creating the whole dynamic. So as a result, the field's behind and it's catching up, which is awesome. So, so ES9273 wants to know what's the best way to communicate during compulsive insults. Compulsive is an interesting word. Can you say more what you mean by that? Because that suggests that it's not under your mother's control, that your mom is sort of losing it as a result of that. Yes, I am. I am a psychologist, about 21 ducks. Yes, I am a clinician. I'm a counselor. I'm currently not practicing. I would practice for over 20 years. I had a private practice that I closed a few years ago. So currently and now I'm a content creator, and I deal with education about psychology, education about good mental health and relationships. So that's been my focus. So thanks for the question. It's a great question. Yeah, I don't really get into, I know 21 Ducks, you're asking me a lot of my background. I tend not to do that just because it's not very safe to do that in this forum. If this is something you want to talk to me privately, I'd be happy to have you DM me over on Instagram, and we can get into my credentials if you'd like to know what they are. I'm not for sure the point of asking my credentials, other than, you probably want to know that you're safe, but yes, yes, I am a clinician. So ES9273, she hasn't been in my life and now she is, and because she wants something and it's not getting her way. So compulsive, you mean like she repeats this over and over and over and she doesn't stop. So what have you tried? I would be curious to know, have you left the room? Do you ask her to please stop? I mean, what kind of boundaries have you? Yeah, you say you do. And I take it she chases you? She moves from room to room with you or something like that? James, I'm not for sure how Instagram is related to narcissistic abuse. It's just another social media platform, and it's a better platform for messaging than this platform is. This platform, both people have to follow each other. Over there, you don't have to, which makes it easier for people to get a hold of me if they need to. Yeah. So ES, back to your question of what should you do about that? It sounds like you need to limit your access. I mean, if you are telling a boundary and she's literally not respecting it at any level and you can't get away from her, then that sounds like the only way then to get away from her literally is not to be exposed to her. Yeah, exactly. You're ignoring her call and then you leave the house. That is your only recourse in that situation. I know all of us wish we could change people. I mean, we would. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if you could make people be easier to be around? But the reality is we can't. All we can do is control what we do when we're around them and the kind of access we allow them to have. Yeah, absolutely. Ice Skater asks, what's the best time of therapy for recovering from raised by a narcissist, EMDR or trauma bond related therapy? Both of them are good. Both of them have their place. I would say it's what you need with where you're at. I mean, if you're being bothered by a lot of intrusive thoughts, you're having flashbacks, then you're going to want to do EMDR. But if you want to just really understand the connection you have and how you're still kind of obsessing and feeling really connected to that person, then I would urge you to probably move in the direction of more traditional therapy to help you with the trauma bond. Make sure the therapist that you see knows what a trauma bond is. Not all therapists, again, that's more what lay people talk about. That's not something you're going to probably hear a whole lot because it's recent. It was a construct created by Patrick Carnes, whose work was really with sex addiction. He actually has an institution where he treats people who are struggling with that. And obviously when they have with people who tend to do that, there's a lot of narcissistic abuse that goes along with that condition. And so he's the one that coined that term. So I ask and make sure that you know what that is. Yeah, so, let me restate now that the room is filling up with people. Please put your questions in Q&A. I, right now, have not been interacting with that, but I will. I will begin to start to use that as a way to answer questions. That way I won't miss anything. So, Chichiles, I'm going to take your question, and then I'm going to start to jump to the Q&A just so that I don't miss anybody. What's the best therapy to get after going through narcissistic abuse? It's really challenging to find a therapist who's up on this. So here's a few ways I would suggest to find someone who has an expertise in this area. First of all, consider when you look for a therapist like you're interviewing like you're interviewing somebody for childcare or whatever. It's a very important job. This is a very important job you're asking someone to do for you, and you want to make sure this is the right person. So consider it a process like that. And I would initially, have a consultation with this individual and then ask them some questions. Ask them what their thoughts are on codependency versus betrayal trauma. Make sure that they understand that there's a difference, that codependency is related to the addiction model and betrayal trauma is what happens when there's narcissistic abuse. Ask them if they've ever heard of trauma bonds and what their opinion of that is. Ask them what they know about narcissistic abuse. If all of these terminologies are confusing or they don't really know what it is, then I would move on to someone else and check out somebody else. But view it like you're interviewing someone for a really important job. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the Q&A and look at this. And just for you all to know, again, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy. I have a PhD in clinical psychology and over 20 years of counseling experience. Currently, I'm not counseling, but I continue to sort of talk about psychological issues, psychoeducational stuff, everything related to narcissism, personality disorders, and narcissistic abuse. So Melissa wants to know, how do you get a marriage counselor to see emotion? Can you say more, Melissa, what you mean by that? I'm not exactly for sure what you mean by emotion A. There is a type of therapy, I'm going to go ahead and try to answer, even though I'm not for sure I exactly know what you're asking, but I would love to have you expand a little bit more. There is a type of therapy called emotionally focused therapy. It was developed by Susan Johnson out of Canada. It's really wonderful therapy. I've actually experienced it. I would highly recommend it, but not with a narcissist. I would not do that type of therapy with someone who has a personality disorder because it's going to be weaponized. They're very good at being manipulative and exploitive. So, okay, you're wanting to see emotional abuse. Yeah, so I wouldn't do emotionally focused there. So here's the thing: that what they're learning, and like I said, I just was able to sit with two very huge experts in this field who's doing research in narcissistic abuse. And one of the things that they said is couples counseling is not indicated in the beginning. It's not indicated. It is counterindicated. So, and this is what I did when I was in that disastrous second marriage. I was married twice. I was married 31 years to a really decent man, really good man, and he died of cancer. And in my grief, I rushed out and met and married a second guy pretty quickly. I was married 2 years later, and I ended up marrying a narcissistic sociopath, worst kind. And I, being a psychologist, my opinion was, well, we should go get therapy. That's what you do. You go and you sort of try to save the relationship. And what happened was he weaponized it. He got better at exploiting me, got better at manipulating the therapy. He fooled 3 therapists into thinking he was in recovery, and he wasn't. So I don't recommend couples therapy. No one is saying that you should do that. Everything I'm reading, everything I'm hearing, and my own experience is saying that's counterintuitive. So the first thing you need to do is get help for yourself because you're confused. And you probably are having a lot of cognitive dissonance. You're probably having big questions like, who is this person? Are they really good or bad? Do they need help, or are they doing this on purpose? What should I do? Is it wrong for me to leave? And where do I go if I do leave? And what does it say to me that I don't know what to do? You're having that's called cognitive dissonance. And it's really helpful to sit with somebody who just has this great space for you to be able to work through that. If you sit with any counselor who wants to push you into a relationship, that is not a good match. Do not see that person. You need to find someone else. I had 2 therapists I fired because they were pushing me into a direction, and I wasn't ready to take that direction. So it's okay to sit in these places and take time to figure out how you're feeling. So that's a long answer, Melissa. I hope that's helpful. Then, let's see. The next question is, can I please talk about... I want to make sure I don't miss the order because, they don't always put them in order. Can I please talk about healing after divorce? So, Hamid, it is a process, the healing process. Part of it is you've had a big commitment with somebody. There's a lot of loss, a lot of grief. And one of the surprising things that we don't really talk about with grief work is that there's a lot of anger in grief. That you feel like you've been cheated or, that stuff has been stolen time and your energy and your money and, the good parts of you have been stolen. So there's going to be a lot of conflicting feelings. So it's really important that you have the space to sort of work through that. Do you have people who are good at listening? One of the things I did was I jumped into a group therapy and I sat with other people in a similar position and was able to just sort of, be myself and bitch about all the losses. Exactly. Grief, financials, friends, you even lose friends and you lose your social standing and all your relationships change. And it's very, very hard to do that. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I need a moderator today. I don't have any moderators on. So if anybody wants to moderate for me, and I'm aware of who you are, I really do need to know who you are. That means you've been on before and I'm aware of you. Then I'd be happy. Okay, you'll moderate. I will let you. Yes, I do know who you are. I'm happy to add you as a mod because I need a little help. So thank you for that. Yeah. If you see anybody who's just sort of just being silly or is just trying to be antagonistic on purpose, I'd really appreciate you blocking them because there are this is being trolled and we need a little help here. So thank you for that. So yeah, Hamid, I'm sorry I kind of got distracted there, but I would find safe places to talk about it. You might find therapy really helpful. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I got into group therapy. I found it really, really useful. But you definitely it's going to take time. If someone died in your life, you would expect yourself at least a year, right? Or more. I once heard that it takes 5 years for every year you're married. I hope that's wrong, because it's an awful long time. But I do say I've been 3 years out of that last relationship, and I feel like I'm starting to get my feet back under me. So, and I was married 2 years to that person. So it takes some time. So give yourself the space to figure out who you are. And one of the things, and I get really concerned about this and I know we're both guilty of it, but I see men do it a little faster than women. And I hope I'm not stepping on any toes, but really watch not rushing into the next relationship. I know it's hard to be alone. I hated it. I didn't want to be alone. That's why I was with somebody, right? But take some time to figure out who you are and who you want to be, because you're going to be changing. You're not this person you were when you met that person. Time's passed. You're not the same person. So take some time to figure out who you are today and who will be, who you're going to be next. So that way that you can find someone that fits the new you better. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I agree, Sarah. Not everybody does get married, so please forgive me for that bias. But he was talking about divorce. That's why I was referring to the marriage, because of the context, not necessarily the context of the relationship. You're right. Now you embarrassed me. Now I'm turning. I blush easily. So exactly. You're right. There's still repercussions, even if it's a long-term relationship versus a marriage. So Ms. Muse asking some questions. There's a whole group of questions that I think that's the same issue. I'm going to look at them again. You have 10 years of cutoff. It stalks online. You're being it looks like you're having flying monkeys, and then you're also wondering what you should do. Yeah, that's really hard. We can't control, unfortunately, it's not against the law for people to stalk online, as long as they're not harassing. I think if they start to harass you, can definitely report that. But if it's just silent behavior and they're just aware, I know it's happening to me. I know that. I actually have proof of it, so I am aware that mine is stalking me. But some of it you can't stop unless it becomes forms of harassment, where they're trying to financially impact you or saying slanderous things about you. So the hard part is learning how to go ahead and not be controlled by it. And anyone who's joining me who's new, please make sure you put it in the Q&A so I don't miss your questions. That's where we're putting the questions, so we can just make sure that everybody gets gets a chance to ask. But part of it is for you to practice no contact, including their social media profiles. That's what I've been doing lately. Is it was driving me nuts. I kept checking. I have ability to know whether or not this person's watching me or not, and I just sort of stopped. I stopped looking because whenever we do that, we're still giving them control over us. We're acting as if they're in our lives when we really don't want them in our lives. So the way to do that is to do no contact across a whole board, which is even social media platforms where you just stop watching. I know it's hard to manage all of that, and you can't. So I suggest you live as though it's not happening. You know it's happening, but live like it's not happening, because here's the thing. We really need to take our lives back. And as I said today in one of the videos, is their primary concern is power, domination, and control. And when we are preoccupied with the stalking behavior or the harassing, the watching us behavior, then it's still giving them power, domination, and control over us. And we just don't. So take it back. Live your life. Live the way you want it. Ignore all that shit. And that's the way to break free of it, And you know what? That's your best revenge, by the way, because they don't want you doing better. They want your life to be devastated, and that proves that they're great people. But when you go ahead and you live well, then that's a way for you to show that they don't have any control over you, that you're doing great, You're more than you were before. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and clear the rest of the questions, because that was all sort of the same questions. I know you guys have been talking a lot about them. Exactly, I agree. Tell your story. Bella, I agree with you. Tell your story. Don't become preoccupied with that. Because they will find, they can find a way, honestly. They really can, if they want to. It's easy these days. It's easier than ever. And so you have to live like it's not happening, even when it feels like even when you know it is, you have to live like it's not happening. So one of the things I've been checking out lately is some good resources. And so let me share you some of those really good resources. Okay, that's a great question. So another question came in because there for a second, there weren't any questions. What is the biggest sign your spouse is a narcissist? Oh, that's a great one. Did you know narcissism wasn't even a diagnosis until 1980? Really? I mean, it was identified that around the turn of the 20th century by a few researchers. One of them is Kohut. He's a big one. And I think another one's Otto Kernberg. But it wasn't until the DSM-3, it was a DSM-3 that we made it actually a personality disorder. And now they're referring to it in the literature. So if you go out and look for it, as part of a cluster B, which is really what they're talking about is antagonistic personality styles, which is a better way to think about them. They're antagonistic, right? They create problems. They're the opposite of agreeable is antagonistic. So what's the big sign that there's 9 symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. I don't know if I'll be able to list all 9, but if you're seeing a preoccupation with their specialness, if they're behaving like they're entitled, if you're seeing somebody who's being exploitive and manipulative, somebody who feels like it's okay to be deceptive and lie or other things in order to get their way, those are the diagnostic categories that have to be met to be diagnosed as a personality disorder. But let me talk about it from a developmental standpoint, because that's how I conceptualize it. So it's all really actually on a continuum. We go through, when we're born, we go through various stages to grow our identity. So when we're born, we really don't see ourselves as separate from the mother. We see ourselves as part of her. And because we were, in utero, we were attached to her. Now we're not attached, but we're still very dependent, wholly dependent on her taking care of us, or we would die. So as a result of us, we still see ourselves as somewhat attached. But in the process of developing an identity, we then begin to have fears that happen as we separate ourselves from that person psychologically. The first fear, if you those of you who raised children, notice that they become afraid when you leave. It's called separation anxiety. They start to cry when you leave the room. That's an awareness that they've gained that they are separate from you and that you actually can walk away. You can disappear on them. They don't have what's called object constancy. So when you disappear, in their mind, you literally have disappeared. They don't realize you're in the other room. That's why they get so scared. They suddenly feel completely alone. So that's a very early stage. But as they grow, one of the other things that they begin to need to know is that you see them and that you understand how they're feeling. This is called attunement. They need to know that there's a sense of, my pain matters. I'm seen. I have worth. People understand me and have compassion for me and empathy for me. We call that mirroring. They need to be mirrored. The other need that happens around that period of narcissistic injury is called the apple of the eye. They need to know that they're special, that to someone, to the parent or caretakers, that they are the most unique person in the world. And doesn't that how our babies feel to us? We feel like there's no one better. Their poop doesn't stink. We think they're wonderful. So we need both of those needs met by our primary caretaker. When that doesn't happen, and nobody gets this done perfectly. We all have sort of problems. But when that doesn't happen consistently, that leaves a person unable to sort of finish those challenges. And as a result, they become very preoccupied and obsessed. And they're trying to meet that need in their own way, in their own broken way as a result of that. And that then it becomes a form of narcissism. So they don't see other people as people. They just see people as like tools or objects to meet their needs. They have an insatiable need for attention, admiration, for adoration. They can't really unconditionally love someone else. Everything is rather conditional. You are only visible to them to the degree that you meet their needs. And when you have needs of your own, your needs go unmet or denied or rejected. So there's this they're literally like the sun, and everybody around them orbits around them as like planets. We're only, incidental to them. So those are the ways that it kind of feels to be in a relationship with someone like that. It's very painful for those around them because, you're giving out all of this to them thinking, wow, if I can meet their needs, then they'll see me. No, it's not reciprocal. It'll never be reciprocal. They feel insatiable, like they're draining you and it's taking more and more. And that's because whatever you give them doesn't stay. It's called, they have low receptive capacity. It means that literally whatever you're giving them, all that attention and love and adoration, pours right through them because it doesn't stick, because they don't have it inside of themselves for themselves. So they're just absorbing everything that people are giving them, and it just passes through. I always felt like one of my parents is a narcissist, and I always felt like, you ever hear of the black hole has a point of no return where it's impossible? I always felt like I was in the event horizon, like this person was. I could give light and give light and give light, and it would be never enough. They were just like absorbing it all in like a black hole. It's a very uncomfortable, unsettling feeling to be in a relationship with a narcissist. But it's also scary, especially when they have sociopathic tendencies. My ex did, because that group gets sadistic and malicious. They hold grudges. They are very aware of what they need, and if you don't comply, they're gonna punish you for it. So if you get somebody with that kind of mix, that is a very. I always felt scared. Honestly, felt a lot of fear around that person. They're very overwhelming. Absolutely. So that was a long answer. I hope that's helpful. If you think your partner is a narcissist and you really want help with that, I recommend go seeing a psychologist or a social worker. Get some mental health counseling, and to see whether or not they agree. But make sure you see somebody who understands this so that they don't pathologize you for coming in and making it an issue, because that may happen if you get someone who's uninformed, unfortunately. So Lamel wants to know, I'm testifying in an upcoming trial against my narc ex. I have some advice. I've testified before, not against a narc. Well, probably they were narcissists, but I've been pulled in when I was working as a psychologist. I was pulled in and testified a few times and did a deposition and stuff. So let me give you some suggestions. Please do not use the word narcissist. Don't use the word narcissistic abuse. It will not be received well. They will not hear it. They'll see you as histrionic. That's not helpful. So you want to use descriptives, like you need to be factual. Like, say, on November such and such, this person came over to my house and screamed these things, and then say the things in quotation marks. If you know the time and the date, that's even better. And who was with this person. But stick to the facts. Don't make any assumptions. Don't make any conclusions, because that's not your job. Your job is just to provide facts. It's the court's job to make the conclusions and assumptions. When we jump and say it was really dismissing, or I felt invalidated, they're going to say, are you a psychologist? I don't remember you getting licensed on that. So don't go there, because it's a setup for you, and it just makes you look histrionic, and you don't want that. But I would like go in and build a case by being factual. It happened this time. This was screamed this many times. This is what was said. This is how many times they're calling me. This is what I have proof of this would happen to me. But be very, very factual, and then you'll do fine. And watch out for trick questions. Answer the question exactly what was asked. Don't answer anything extra around it. Stick to what was asked. If they don't extrapolate, that's a trick. Don't do that. If you can just stick to that, it will be really, really helpful. Exactly. I agree, Bella. Write your facts down. Make sure you know them. Go in prepared and stick to the question and stick to the facts. I hope that helps. It's not easy. I know it's scary. It's very scary. And especially when it's a narcissistic ex, it makes you scared. Yeah, because, this is an interesting thing. See, one of the things that happens in all of us is that we're reacting to each other all the time. So when we're around people who don't care, don't respect us, and aren't listening, we feel confused and stumbly. We get all kind of weird with our words. So I know they do that to you. I get that. So you're kind of going in like nervous. I get that. So focus on, the person ignore who's in the room. Just focus on the person who's talking to you, or find a dot, find some dot out in the, or a friendly face, and look at that person and then just speak to that person. That will help you kind of ignore the bigger context. Let us know how it goes. Okay. Come back and let us know, we're here. So I get it. Yeah. So you also asked this question. You're having a hard time finding a therapist. I know I've talked quite a bit about that today. I hope my comments about this has been helpful. One of the nice things that's happening, Lamel, is that therapists right now a lot of them have gone online, which means that you can see more people. If you continue to have a hard time, I know people who are coaching as well as therapists. I'd be happy to refer you to them. So DM me over in Instagram. I have the same handle. By the way, I had to change my handle, so sorry about that. It's just kind of a confusing technicality I just didn't want to be caught on. So, but yeah, DM me over under Carrie McAvoy PhD over on Instagram, and I'd be happy to point you in some direction of that if you're having a hard time finding a therapist. For those of you who are new and joining me, please, if you have any questions, please put them in Q&A so I don't miss them. And again, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I have a PhD in clinical psychology, over 20 years of private practice experience. I wrote a book, guys, and it came out. It's doing, I think I've now got 24 reviews. I'm so happy about that. It's amazing. You guys rock. Thank you so much. It's called Love You More, The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. It was published a month ago, and I think I've crossed over. An average book for an indie author sells 250 books in a lifetime. I think I know I've sold more than that in a month. So that is amazing. I'd love to go bestseller. I'd have to do 5,000 in a week, but we'll see, right? Well, the power of TikTok and the power of Instagram. It's amazing, isn't it? So yeah, I'm glad you asked the question. Please come back, M. Lamel, and tell us how it goes. I really want to hear how it goes for you. Very traumatizing. Yeah, because they do mentally. In fact, there's a cognitive dissonance is when we have two competing beliefs, thoughts, opinions, or whatever. It's two competing things, and we're holding them together, and they don't make sense. So, for example, if you just started a diet and you go into the office and your favorite donuts from your best bakery is there, you face cognitive dissonance. Are you going to break the diet for the donuts, or are you going to say no to the donuts, not knowing when you're going to ever have that donut again in order to protect the diet? See, that moment of distress is cognitive dissonance. You're feeling the two competing goals or desires against each other. These types of relationships with abusive, toxic people is filled with cognitive dissonance, filled with it. From the moment you discover something's wrong, all the way to when you leave, and even after, you stay conflicted. Even after you wonder, did I make the right decision? Is now this person happier with someone new? It's filled with it. In fact, I'm working on a course. I'm developing a course on cognitive dissonance called Stressed and Trapped: How to Break Free the Toxic Hold of Cognitive Dissonance. And I'm looking for beta participants. So if you'd like to go through it for free for the exchange of, I would really like quite a bit of feedback from you about it and your help with a few features of it, and then also for you to leave a review about it. So if you're interested in doing that for free, please DM me over on Instagram. I will add you to the list. It probably will be ready to go in a couple weeks. So it's going to be like a very psychological experience. So not only will you learn information, but you'll also have a chance to process it regarding to your life. And there will also be a component where you can interact with me around it to get some of my feedback and thoughts about where you're stuck or maybe where you're confused. So if you think that might be something you'd be interested in, please let me know. I'm really looking for participants that will go through it and give me some feedback on its helpfulness, making sure I hit the mark where I want to. So I'd love that. That would be awesome. Oh, you were just, Bella, they brought up your book. Were you listening to Abuse is Abuse, Bella? Were you over there with Bree today? She was on this morning. She's a good friend of mine. Yeah. I would love Oh, okay. So 2015 reborn. You know what? I try not to follow tons of people because it just gets too crazy. But I just followed you. So if you follow me, 2015 reborn, you can message me here. But it's hard to message on TikTok. It's just, I don't know why they make it so hard, but they make it hard. Whereas in Instagram, it's not. We don't have to follow each other. But, yeah, and Bella, I'll do the same with you. I'm going to follow you so that way you can message me here. And oh, hey, Chris, I would love to have help with the moderation. Ms. Mew is also helping with the moderation, but if you want to also pay attention, I'd really appreciate that. But Bella, my lady, so also DM me here so that I don't forget. I'm going to add your name so I can get a hold of you when it's ready. If you think you're interested in that, that would be awesome. Yeah. So I'm reading through the comments. There's no Q&A at the moment, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A, and I'd be happy to take them. So someone said I told me to get over it because I'm your mom. Oh man, Foxy Kitty, that is gaslighting. Yeah, that's a form of gaslighting. Gaslighting is a simple way to think of gaslighting is anytime that somebody says that invalidates you or makes you feel crazy or makes you feel invisible as a way to deal with their uncomfortableness. So, apparently something happened and she didn't like it. So instead of her dealing with the damage to the relationship or the damage to you, she made it you. She made you the problem. That's gaslighting. It came out of a movie. Have you guys seen there's two old movies, both black and white. The one is way better. The oldest is the original, obviously. It's the original. But then there's a second one that was with Ingrid Bergman. Wonderful movie. Really wonderful. Fascinating story. I don't know if you guys know what the story is. But the story is that so a guy had jewelry in the house. He knew there was jewelry in the house. I don't remember how he knew. I think I know. I think he had stolen them and then hid them in the house. And so what he did was he married the woman, and then he proceeded to make her think she was going crazy. It was before electricity, so he'd make the gas lights flicker. And she'd say, "Do you see the gas lights flickering?" And he'd say, "No, I don't." And then he'd play music in the house, pipe it through the house. And then she'd say, "I hear this music." And no, I don't know what you're talking about. But he did that so he could put her into an asylum. And, hey, Bree, so good to see you. He did that to put her in an asylum so that he then could have unrestrained access to the house to search for the treasure. Well, she went to an inspector and started telling this guy what was happening, and they got on it. They researched who he was, figured out what he was up to, that he was actually a con artist, and then set him up. So they set him up and trapped him. That's where gaslighting came from. It was literally, he was about the gaslights and telling her that it wasn't true and making her feel crazy. So that's what gaslighting does to us. It's a way for us to feel defective and bad. It invalidates us and makes us feel crazy. But cognitive dissonance is a form of all gaslighting creates cognitive dissonance, because when that happens, you have to say to yourself, "Am I? Is that true? Or maybe I'm wrong." It makes you question yourself, and that creates cognitive dissonance. So all gaslighting creates cognitive dissonance. And you know what they're finding out about cognitive dissonance? It creates brain damage. Isn't that horrifying? Long-term effect of chronic dissonance creates brain damage. So now they're trying to figure out that's the biggest complaint of survivors of narcissistic abuse is this pain, the pain of it. And they're now beginning to look at how do we reduce the pain of it. So that's my goal with this course, is to help people with that, help you identify it, figure out where you're going to go, what you're going to do about it. So, yeah. So some questions that come in. So, yeah, please ask your questions through the Q&A so I can keep track of them. You're worried someone's talking to my, I'm in touch with, is talking to your ex. Yeah, that, the primary goal of all people who do narcissistic abuse, and I don't really want to limit to just narcissists because they're not the only ones who do it. Sociopaths do it. Sometimes borderline personality disorders do it as well. But is that they want power, control, and domination. So whenever you get afraid and start acting on that fear, you're then under their power and control. Yeah. So do they have flying monkeys? Flying monkeys is anyone who sort of supports them. They buy their story, and then for whatever reason, often, one of the things I find out about these people, I know people don't like to have me use the word these people, but toxic people tend to be very charismatic. And as a result of that, we find ourselves attracted to them, and we want their approval. If you're really honest with yourself, don't you find you sort of secretly wish they would see you? That's one of the ways I know I'm around a narcissist, is when I feel that feeling, when I feel like this, oh, I wish, what do they think of me? And I'm not talking about dating and hoping to get some. I'm talking about anyone that you meet and you feel this draw to want to have their approval. You probably have met a narcissist, because we want that. We unconsciously want that because something about them feels risky or not quite safe, or maybe they feel like they have more power than we do, or more something than we do, and we don't feel secure. That's a sign of our insecurity. So if you feel that, I would run. I would really be careful around that person. The problem is that that's what happens to flying monkeys. Flying monkeys feel the same, and as a result, they weigh in on that person and then try to what's called fawning. You know what we always say? There's fight, flight. No, there's actually 4 responses to threat. We might flee, we might fight it, we might freeze, which is like what a rabbit does, or we might fawn. And what flying monkeys are doing is they're fawning. They're like, oh, you're the best thing ever in the whole world, and all this kind of excessive stuff. And so one of the ways that they ingratiate themselves with this person is by then spying on you, or smearing you, or participating in that whole thing. But whenever we get all caught up with that and get, stirred up, then we've given them the power again. The power is slid back over to them. So the best way to deal with it is ignore it. Go no contact with those people as much as you can. Don't let it control you. You go ahead and you live your absolute best life, because that's your revenge, is you living your best life. Exactly. What motives are behind toxic positivity? Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I come out of a religious background, a very conservative religious background, so I'm very familiar with it. It's a lot of that happens in some circles. It's another form of emotional denial. It's the same process that you're seeing with other forms like invalidation, minimization, dismissal. What they're doing is they're wrapping up something that's sorry, I keep bumping that mic. They wrap up something that's negative and put a positive spin on it. But the request of it is, we're not going to talk about the hard thing. We're going to pretend the hard thing is not even there. So let me use my book as an example. So the worst reviews I've gotten for my book, I Love You More, the harrowing tales of lies, sex addiction, and double cross. And I'm going to tell you, it's explicit. I don't hide anything, and there's sex scenes in it. It's not erotic, trust me. There's nothing erotic about those scenes. They're sad, actually. But it's explicit and raw. I had beta readers read it, and I told everybody who read it, I warned them up ahead. I said it's raw, and it's graphic, and it has sex in it, because it's about sex addiction. 3 people came back. The worst abuse I got was from the extreme religious right. Horrible. They abused me. They actually abused me. They called me names, told me it was my fault. It was horrible. And then said if I had been more religious, none of this would ever have happened to me. By the way, I know lots of people who are in these circles who are struggling with this. This is not isolated to somebody who doesn't go to church. This is happening in the church, and it's happening outside of the church. So that's a form of toxic positivity. Their opinion is, if we just sort of believe these really great things, then these bad things won't happen to me. There's a word for it. It's called spiritual bypassing. I wrote a blog about it on medium.com. And also, if you put in the search for spiritual bypassing, you'll pull up all this information about it. It's fascinating. It is actually a form of abuse. It's been sort of said, and it can just not just happen in Christian circles. I've seen it happen in New Age circles, and anything that's has a belief system is at risk for doing it. It's because we don't like, it's a form of denying our emotions and denying that things are complex and that nothing is that simple. We don't like that. We like the more immature you are emotionally, the more you want life to be simple, and it just isn't. It just isn't. So that's what toxic positivity is. So how many hours will my cognitive dissonance course take? I'm anticipating, Mike, it's going to be between 5 to 10 hours. I really don't know. That's one of my questions. It's probably not less than 5, and I'm sure it's not more than 10. So I'm thinking, and I think it's going to be closer to 5 to 7 hours maybe, because part of it is what you do with it, the time that you take on it. You know, each module may take maybe a half an hour to get through, but you may then sit and do some of the exercises, and that's going to take more time, you know, so that it will kind of be dependent on that. I hope that helps answer your question. Yeah. So, yeah. So you're saying, Stephanie, my ex and I went to church all the time and he treated me bad. Yeah, I know. I mean, going to church doesn't make people good and doesn't make people different. And the same with psychology. There's a lot of ill people. Some of the most ill people I've ever met who are counselors. I hate to tell you that. That's why I tell you, approach therapy like you're approaching looking for a care provider for your child. You know, look, the same effort that you go into finding someone like that, make sure you spend the same effort looking for someone that you're going to spend trusting with your heart and soul. So it's very serious stuff. And there are a lot of toxic people, and you think about it. The field of mental health, I just said they're after power, domination, and control. Well, you know what? When you're a therapist, you have enormous power. That person's listening to you. That's a form of domination. And that means I'm in control. So who's going to be attracted to that? Yeah, I've met them there. I know they're there. One of the guys I met two practitioners. I knew personally 2 practitioners who were being unethical. One of them, I left the practice. It was so bad I had a confrontation and got out of there. It was awful. So you got to be careful. Got to really, really be careful. And, you know, the assumption is that there are safe places with safe people. No, there is not. There's no safe place, and you have to assess every person and make sure that they're safe. Yeah, one of my clients had been severely abused by a therapist. So it took me a year to get her to trust that she could even show up in the office because she'd been so wounded by another therapist. So yeah, I definitely be careful. Please be careful. I can't say enough about that. Yeah, it's not surprising, Goofy Mommy, that what you've experienced. Yeah, exactly. That's what I say. Go in and ask them questions. You want to know what they think about betrayal trauma. You want to know what their opinion is, who's codependent. You want to know what kind of experience they've had with narcissistic abuse. Have they even heard of the terminology? You want to know, do they know what it means to have something weaponized? You know, you want to know them. They should know the lexicon to what we're talking about here. In fact, I just got done, I don't know if I'll say her name, Durasavella. Ramani Durasavella is one of the leading narcissistic abuse experts in the United States. And she said she was training clinicians this weekend. She said, it is your job to know the lexicon. You need to know what a flying monkey is. You need to know what hoovering is. Because I hate to tell you, a lot of therapists don't. They don't even know the words, don't even know what you're talking about. And you don't want to see someone who doesn't know that stuff. Yeah, you're right. We are the most, people who've been in narcissistic abuse relationships have had a lot of abuse, including financial abuse. Have you heard of the word ambient abuse? I know if you've been in a narcissistic abusive relationship, you've experienced ambient abuse. It's pervasive. Sam Vaknin talks about it. In fact, I think he's the one who even coined the term. He's a self-aware, malignant narcissist. So it's fascinating listening to him. And he tells you need to run. And he's in a relationship too. I always find that really intriguing. But So ambient abuse, and I experienced a lot of it. I didn't know it. I didn't know what was happening. It's when they manage the things around your life that keep you healthy and functioning as a person. So they'll erode your sleep. They'll affect your schedule of food so that you're not eating regularly or well. They will withhold or hide or keep money from you, or they will. So ambient means like environmental. That's what ambient means. Everything around you is like the ambient music, what the background music. So what they do is it looks innocent. So this is how my ex did it. And it was like, when I really realized this, I was like, oh. So he was a serial cheater. He knew that I knew that he was a serial cheater. So what happened? I needed to be with him 24/7. It's the only way to keep him safe, because he was that bad. It was that bad. So what we would do is we'd run around, and we were living in another country, and I didn't speak the language he did. So we'd run around together and do all the work together. And then when we got done, I didn't get any of the stuff I needed to be done, and we were running a business. So I have my job and his job. And now I had to work a second shift, and he stopped working, and he'd relax for the evening, and I was still I literally worked 16, 18 hours a day. Then we had the TV in the room, even though he didn't like it, and we had another TV out in the living room. He would watch TV in the bedroom and watch till 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. He'd watch every night, and then he'd set the alarm at 6 a.m., even though we didn't have to be anywhere until 9, because remember, we did this business together. And so I was only getting a few hours of sleep, and he'd do that over and then we wouldn't stop for breakfast or lunch. We would eat only until dinner. So I wasn't eating all day. We were running all day, and I was working all day, every day. That's ambient abuse. He was abusing me indirectly by controlling all these factors to where I didn't have any control of my life, and I was literally feeling like I was just choked. I just felt was exhausted. I couldn't think straight. And think about it. When we try to break down a prisoner, if you were a prisoner of war, what would they do? They would limit your food, they would limit your sleep, and they would limit how quiet. They would limit your time. Why? Because they want to break you down. So when people who are doing this, they're doing it intentional, and it's to keep you off balance and to keep you not at your best. Yeah, exactly. That's what mine did too, Purple Phoenix. He watched YouTube till late in the night. Stupid, dumb shit that car crash. Why would I want to watch a car cam? I wouldn't even have control over my own damn TV. It was awful. So watch out for ambient abuse, guys. It's almost universally present in narcissistic abusive relationship. Mine was, now I'm going to ruin the book. He was poisoning me. My ex was poisoning me, trying to kill me. So, yeah, and I was sick, so I was really sick. I was showing signs of that. Yeah, I've heard other people telling me that they've put stuff in their food too. I mean, I'm hearing this is more, I'm shocked at how common it is, because somebody else was just telling me the same, that they were putting stuff in their food to make them sick. Mine was, he wanted to inherit the business, is what mine was after. He was after the money. So I can't prove it, but yeah. Hey, Toxic Abuse Anonymous, don't you have a pretty large following? Anybody who goes live and would love to interview me around the book, I'd be happy to do that. I sort of suspected I was being poisoned because I had mace lines across all my fingernails, mace lines. And when I was researching it, and I had all the signs. I mean, it was awful. Could you go and look at arsenic poisoning? It's right. The whole list is there. I was even hospitalized a couple times. They thought I might have suffered a heart attack. At one point, I collapsed on an airplane, and a doctor was there and thought I had a heart attack. It was horrible. So anyway, I interviewed the other wives. He'd been married 4 other times. I was like, clue, hello, big clue. And when I interviewed the third wife came on and said, I think he was poisoning me, is what she said. And I said, what? And I had not said anything. And she said, I think he was poisoning me. Like, I had to get off the phone. I was so overwhelmed. So anyway, and then I got a hold of a poison control nurse who confirmed my symptoms were heavy metal symptoms. But it took me 2 years. I'm doing better. I'm doing a lot better. I was sick a while. I had a lot of problems. So, but yeah, it was scary. It was very scary. Yeah, I've been here for a little bit today. Any last questions before we head out? And this has been wonderful to hang out with you guys. I'm going to go live tomorrow, just so that you know, at 2 o'clock. And as you guys who know me know, I always go within the hour, not strictly right at 2, but right within that hour. But I would love to hang out with you tomorrow, and we'll talk more about narcissistic abuse. But any last questions before we wrap it up? And thank you guys so much for following me. Thank you for checking out my book. I appreciate that. Thank you for the mods who do this. I really, really appreciate you. It's always fun to talk about psychology and narcissistic abuse and abuse. That's 2 o'clock Central Time, 2 o'clock Central Time. I always wish that we didn't experience these things. I wish the best for all of us. And Goofy Mommy, I'm really glad you're here too, and I'm glad you asked your questions today. And I do remember people, so I'll remember you when you guys come back up. And Spiritual Samurai, it's always amazing to see your stuff. Hey, you guys don't follow Spiritual Samurai, please follow him stuff. He's also on Instagram. Oh, Lamel, thank you so much. I can't wait. And I'd love to know what you think. Please let me know. And Ms. Mew, thank you so much for popping in here and helping out today. I really appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of the day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.